Hi everyone, welcome back to the Power of a Hobby. I'm your host, Dom Fenton, and today we start again. So this will be the start of season 2, and I have a special guest with me. Hello, special guest. Why don't I get you to introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners?
Hi, I didn't realize that was the first one of season 2. Yay! So I'm Aina. I'm a photographer and I also run a theatre school, and I teach kids performing arts, but also photography and creativity skills.
Brilliant. So Aina, we've had a brief chat, and as I said to you, I don't tend to let people know the questions until they come online, because I prefer a different reaction. So, but the first question of the podcast today is, what does the power of a hobby mean to you?
Oh, it means a ton of things. It means a ton of things. I didn't become a photographer through being a hobbyist, which is something that people tend to think that was the path, but it wasn't. I jumped straight into being a professional photographer after studying film, but having that skill then helped me when I needed it, when I needed to use it as a hobby. I could, and it's helped me through difficult times, and also it's helped me understand things. So the major one, I guess, and that's where it becomes very obvious how it's helped me. It was my husband passed away. It was almost 9 years ago now, and we had a baby at the time. She's 9 now. So it was a very, very hard time, and even the the circumstances at which it happened as well was very shocking and difficult to understand, difficult to process. And I wasn't at a time where I could process, because I had a very young baby, and I was starting a new job as well. So there were a ton of things where I couldn't actually process what was happening to me properly. So it wasn't until a few years later that I took up a photography project as a hobby. I was already a photographer, a professional photographer, but I guess I took it up as a hobby to create this project that combined photography and writing, and it helped me through understanding what had happened. And it's there. It's never done anything, as in it's sitting in a file somewhere, but it was just as a hobby. It was not a service. It was not something I did for money. It was for me, and therefore I understand that a hobby can be very, very powerful, and that really helped me. So yeah, that's when I saw the power of a hobby. I said, yeah, it can be very, very powerful. So yes, it can also help you through smaller things. You don't need to have to go through tragedy for it to help you, but I think it's any hobby can be very helpful at any age.
Brilliant. So yeah, as you know, I think people who have listened to this before, they understand what I believe the power of the hobby is, and and a lot of the guests we get on, it does seem that actually we have big things that happen to us, but as you said, it actually doesn't need to be that. So in terms of, if the listeners can't gauge everything just in that, so obviously you mentioned about the photography and the writing. How long before that had you been a photographer, and how did you get into it in the first place?
Well, that's quite interesting, because I went to film school. I didn't go to photography school. Obviously there were some very specific modules on photography, but they were always a bit more aimed at illumination, and it wasn't specifically at still photography, although we did a little bit of that. So I was in the film industry for quite a while, and my husband was in the film industry as well. We ran a production company together, and it was. And then when I was sort of transitioning out of the film industry, I started helping a studio, friends of mine, that did weddings. And in video, I was in video. I was still not in photography, because obviously from films, it's the moving image. So I didn't go straight into photography. I went into video. And it wasn't until my partner passed that I realized how important photography was, to capture those moments. And now I can see in the back of your screen, in the back of your frame, that you've got lots of photos of you and your girls, and how important those are to you. And that's why we frame them, we put them up on walls. And unfortunately, I didn't have that with my husband and my daughter. I had it separately, but we only had one of us together, because it happened when my daughter was very young, and having photos of us was kind of not in my frame of mind. So we didn't get them, and the opportunity passed, and I was very happy doing weddings and stuff, but I did think, well, that's when things start. What happens after? We need to capture that, things that aren't milestones as big as a wedding. The day to day, that those families, those moments need to be captured as well, because they say so much about who we are. They create a sense of belonging in kids. They know who they belong to, not in property way, okay, but where they belong, and what family they are part of,
Yeah.
and who their social network is. So so that is how I transitioned into photography, and I created a business out of it. So that's how it was never actually a hobby, but then I have used it as a hobby to understand things about my life, and running personal projects.
Yeah, and
I don't think that answered your question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's right. No, but I think I think generally we have hobbies. We generally have hobbies growing up, but actually that doesn't stop us then getting a new hobby when we're older, and we move into things for all different reasons. And I think this is the beauty of a hobby as such, and then the passing of that potential hobby onto someone else. And obviously now, from moving into photographs, you're now passing it on to other people. So do you want to tell me now about obviously what you are doing, and sort of how you're helping future young people and future adults find their hobby?
Yeah, so I started teaching children photography through a series of videos. I tried to make it as fun as possible, as engaging as possible. And it's not to create photographers. The goal is not that at all. In fact, I encourage them to take pictures with phones, whatever device they have. They don't need to wait until they have a fancy camera or lenses or whatever, or lights. I've been told many times, I can't do this because I don't have the lights you have. For many years, I had no lights at all. I just went with whatever there was. It's not the purpose. The purpose is for them to open their eyes to what they have around them, and make the best use of what they have around them, because there is so much that we don't see in our daily lives, and is amazing. So I want them to have that curious mind, and look at things, really look at things, and how amazing they are. And because we take so much for granted, so there's and in the meantime, they're learning how to be creative with their thinking, to think outside the box. And eventually I realized that I was not preaching what I was what I was not doing, what I was preaching, and that I was only letting them do photography with that, which is great. Obviously, I find it fantastic. But but what I've created since is the Creative Challenge Club, which is where the means is irrelevant. They can do whatever they want with that challenge. It doesn't have to be photography. In fact, lots of my kids just use cardboard boxes to create stuff. And you can see how it's lovely to just watch that process of, I've got no idea what I'm going to do, and then all of a sudden they do have an idea, and they go away and they try with whatever they have at home, and they come up with something. And you can see, and since then I've been studying a lot about what, why is this helping, why is this good? And it helps mental health, because they're literally creating stuff from nothing. And that, even though they're not consciously thinking, oh, I had a cardboard box and now I have a lab, one of them created a lab from a cardboard box, it creates a sense of self-confidence. It helps build those pillars, because they've made something, they've created something. So I'm trying to teach those skills, and the fact that they don't need the fancy tools to get anything done. They can do it with whatever they have at home, which I think is important.
Yeah, and I think the modern world we're in at the moment, it's more important than we ever realised, because actually there are so many children out there who want what other children have got. And the fact is, they'll be picked on at school because they haven't got the latest phone, or they haven't got the latest trainer, or they haven't got, and obviously that's part of what I deal with, obviously in my other work. But I just think the amount of, and I'm sure if parents listen to this now, the amount of times that we buy these gifts for the children at Christmas or birthdays, or just they've been good and we'll go out and buy, actually they seem to have more fun with cardboard boxes than they do with maybe potentially what's inside that box.
Yeah. I had a huge cardboard box at home a few years ago, and it lasted, I think, a good 2 years. We created a rocket out of it. We had, I bought some outdoor furniture, that you need to then build. So it came in a huge cardboard box, and it became a rocket, but we kept redoing it for it to become different things. It was a dollhouse at one stage, and my daughter actually had a huge dollhouse, but she played with the cardboard box more than the actual dollhouse. And I think, a dollhouse is also a great thing, but they're both very open-ended, so it lets them use their imagination, it lets them use their creativity to come up with stories. And that's the way we understand the world. Sometimes we need to fictionalize, I don't know if that's a word, things to understand the world. Yeah. So when they're playing and they're creating their little stories, they're making sense of the world. So giving them the tools, or the mechanism to do that, is fantastic. I think I love doing it.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally, what you're doing and what other people do is allow children to be children.
Yeah.
Rather than growing up too quickly, or having to be 20 by the time they're 10.
Yes, and unfortunately that's very much the case. I think my daughter is 9, and I can see how, she wants to be a teenager or a pre-teen, and she's already saying, I'm a pre-teen because I'm not a teenager yet, therefore I'm a pre-teen. And well, with that logic, a newborn is a pre-teen, but But yes, you want to preserve that childhood as long as you can, if you can, because it sets those pillars that will lead them to a more fulfilled life when they grow up.
Yeah, agreed. So obviously you're doing you're doing the creative side of it. You're also then looking at sort of the drama side as well. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So I run a theatre school in Oxford for kids aged 2 to 18, so quite a range of ages there. They come to us on a Saturday, and it is also supporting a hobby with potential professional outcome. But not necessarily. The same way that I don't train photographers, I don't train actors. I train human beings that are rounded. That's the goal. If they then want to become photographers or actors, singers, performers in any way, fantastic. I will be very, very happy to have been someone that was part of their journey to get there. But the idea is that they grow in their confidence, they grow in their skills, and they have that thing that they can always turn to if things go, if they want to. Things don't need to go bad for them to turn to their skill, to their hobby, but that thing that makes them a bit richer in life, not in terms of money, but in life, and yeah, and fulfillment. I know I've mentioned this before, but it just makes you feel a bit more fulfilled when you have that extra thing that makes life a bit more worth living for, something you enjoy.
Yeah, and I think it's great as well. You just said it there. It's that enjoyment factor. It's the fact that actually the children, the other children that they're there with, won't necessarily be at their school.
No.
And actually what they're now doing, what they're now having is improved social skills, and actually being able to make friends that potentially could be with them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and you see it, you see those friendships flourishing, which is really, really cool to see. Obviously my daughter goes to the school, so I've seen it firsthand, how she's become friends with children that aren't in her school. It's also helped her stay in touch with kids that have left her school but are still at the theatre school, so they continue to have that friendship outside of being in school together. So it's all those other things that you think are almost like side effects of having a hobby, right? It's you think that you're taking your children to learn singing, dancing and drama, but you're actually taking them to become friends, to have a nice social network outside of school, outside of the obligatory places. You're taking your children to build their confidence, you're taking your children to get those skills that will get them through life, and they will never be afraid of being in front of people and just talking. They will be comfortable in any situation, and it will also prevent them from maybe going down the wrong route further along. I'm sure you've spoken about this before, because I know you're an expert in things like county lines, and there are lots of things about safeguarding that you're very, very well acquainted with. But I think it was a school in Barcelona that I used to film at, and they had a problem with drugs, with the teenagers. It was a high school, and there were certain groups within the school that were deemed like almost a write-off. Like, these were words that I heard, and they brought in a series of teachers, and they provided them with lots of they did sports. They provided them with lots of sports activities at the weekend, and the fact that they were busy at the weekend, something so silly as they were busy, their lives were occupied doing stuff that they enjoyed, that those problems went down, like to a minimal, to minimum, to something that, I mean, any use of drugs is a problem amongst teenagers, but when it was a high percentage to a very low percentage, it was dramatic. It was just dramatic. And you think, you know, they were taking their child to, I think they did football and basketball and tennis and I don't know, a few other sports, but actually they were taking their child away from negative influences and into something positive. So it's those like secondary or side effects of taking your children to do something that are the best ones. You know, the actual thing seems irrelevant sometimes.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, I think a lot of it is about keeping children busy and being around the right role models.
Yeah.
Whether that's other children in the group, or whether it's like the teachers or the instructors or the coaches, because actually, as someone who's coached for a long time, a lot of the time, I never had a child that was playing the sport, so I was just there coaching. But actually, I treat them all as my own. I treat them as I wanted to treat my own children. And actually, I looked out for all of them, because actually, that was how I saw it. Yeah. You know, and if I can be that role model to them, then fantastic. And if it can keep them on the right path, amazing. Right, just to finish off, because I've taken up enough of your time now. So, final question. If someone came to you and said, I want to do a hobby, but I haven't really got one, and I don't really know where to start, what would you say to them?
Well, I'd ask them if they have any interests, but it is true that especially if they're teenagers, they might just reply with, not really, you know. So that question, I mean, I think it's a necessary question, but it is very likely that they say no, that they don't have any interests, that they're not interested in anything. So I'd say just go and try, and don't give up after one trial. I'd say, because there are lots of hobbies where you start loving them when you start, you know, the better you are at them. So, you know, I imagine, I don't know, think about tennis, for example. When I was a kid, I played a lot of tennis. The first few times I went, you know, I could barely hold a racket, or let alone hit the ball, you know. But I kept going at it, mainly because I was signed up and my parents had paid for it, so I sort of had to. But you know, when you're at that point where you'd like to sort of give up because, you know, it's not really working, but then you start hitting the ball and, oh, actually this is quite cool, and you win a point or two, and say, oh, actually this is getting more fun. So you know, there are lots of hobbies where they become more enjoyable the better you are at them. So don't give up just because you didn't enjoy the first session or two. As long as you're making any sort of progress, you're going to get to a place where it's going to be fun and enjoyable. So yeah, don't just try and leave, but I'd say try whatever works for you. And by works for you means you know, logistics. Does it work for you because it's close to you? Does it work to you because it's within your budget? And you know, and just do it. Just go and do it.
Yeah, love that. If people want to find out more about you, where can they find you?
Either my page, my website, which is Family Memento, or on LinkedIn, social media. I'm on many places. I can send you the links if you'd like.
Yeah. So what we'll do, we'll have the links at the end when we publish the podcast. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Been great. It's been great to have you on. Have a brilliant rest of the day. And thanks for all the viewers and the listeners for tuning in. This is the start of Series 2. I'm your host, Tom Fenton, and this is The Power of a Hobby. Thanks very much.